everyone, and welcome back to the ENGAGE series of the talk show. So the ENGAGE series of public talk shows aim to promote the awareness among national and international stakeholders about the EU-ASEAN Next Gen Think Tank Dialogue Project. So you have had our fair share of episodes. Hopefully that you'll be familiar with the format so far. So each episode we invite a guest speaker from our clusters, and each episode will provide key insights and perspectives from the fellows about the topics of sustainable development, security, and connectivity areas. This would further promote the knowledge sharing on networks, problem and solutions that would advance the partnership, the developments in a particular field, as well as on the implementation by individual actors. And joining us today is Aaron Jed Rabena from Philippines. Aaron, can you please turn on the camera and say hi to the audience?
Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone.
Very inclusive. So Aaron Jed Rabena is a research fellow at the Asia Pacific Pathway to Progress. It is a Manila-based think tank and consultant at AUKUS Incorporated, a business and government relation consulting firm. He is also adjunct fellow at the University of the Philippines Korea Research Center and a member of the Philippine Council for Foreign Relations. He previously served as a senior lecturer at the ASEAN Center at UP Diliman and visiting fellow at the China Institute of International Studies and China Foreign Affairs University. I'm sure that if I share about Dr. Aaron Jed, there will be a whole day that we can talk about. But right now, I guess that our audience are very eager to find out about the topic today. So he's chosen to talk about AUKUS and the regional security structure. So can you please share with us a little bit, why would you choose the topic and what is AUKUS?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Phoung. So I chose to talk about this topic because my areas of interest are basically strategic studies, East Asian geopolitics and multilateral politics, political risk and Chinese politics and foreign policy. So as you can see, the issue of the AUKUS agreement very much falls within the ambit of my areas of interest. And I think that, you know, this deal or this agreement pretty much involves China and also impacts a lot the Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific regional security architecture.
Okay, so a little bit into details. Can you tell us about who initiated the AUKUS and what countries are currently involved within the institution?
Yeah, So, but by the name itself, you know, we can tell that the founders. I mean, this is comprised of the United States,
right,
Australia, and the United Kingdom. So the aim of this trilateral arrangement is basically to strengthen their industry. I mean, their defense capability, their military capability build up, coordinate on defense industry, cooperate on advanced tech, especially those that have dual use functions. And in particular, the very highlight of this agreement is this strengthening the capability build up of Australia's submarines. You know, because instead of Australia having or acquiring diesel electric submarines, with the AUKUS agreement, I think the United States and the UK would help Australia, you know, have nuclear powered submarines. And having nuclear powered submarines is very advantageous because it is it can remain, below surface for much longer a longer span of time compared with a diesel electric submarine, and it is also more quiet compared to a diesel electric submarine. And more often than not, if you have a nuclear powered submarine, that can also be used to launch nuclear missiles. So your nuclear powered submarines can be nuclear capable.
So my research area is obviously not military machinery or vessel, but I imagine that these vessels can take a long time to build. or a
Mhm.
long time to transfer to another country. So can
Mhm.
you tell us a little bit more about how would it actually work, or what have exactly been implemented so far within the mechanism of AUKUS?
Um, I think so. So because caucus was just recently signed,
Mhm.
so I guess these three countries are still finding ways how to coordinate their policies and implement the agreement. So yes, you are right. Australia acquiring nuclear submarines would take some time, but
Mhm.
then when it comes to defense industrial cooperation, when it comes to let's say military exercises, when it comes to uh, technological technological transfers, things like that, then I think AUKUS will move much faster. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, for example, when they coordinate their policies in helping build up the capacities of third countries, for example, ASEAN countries.
Mhm. Yeah, so we also see another security partnership in the region, but it is comprised of four countries. We call it the quadrilateral security dialogue, which already involves two of the members from the AUKUS. So we have the
Mhm.
Quad we have the US, India, Japan, and Australia.
Mhm.
So can you tell us a little bit about the similarity and differences between these two dialogues?
Okay. So you know what the trend right now, the trend that I see is that there's this emergence of trilaterals and minilaterals in the region. And you see, it's kind of like the actor behind this is the United States. The United States is involved, with the Quad. They are a major proponent of the AUKUS, and noticeably also, in these regimes, these arrangements, China is excluded. You see,
Mm.
so that says something. That I think indicates the amount of trust that these AUKUS countries and these Quad countries have or do not have with China. So,
Interesting.
and you would also observe and notice that all of these countries have disputes, in one way or another,
Mhm.
political or territorial or things like that. So all of these countries have issues with China, and now they sort of are coalescing. Um, the confluence of interests between these countries is becoming more broad and more diverse. And you asked about the major difference between the Quad and the AUKUS. Okay, so right now, based on the signing of the AUKUS, it is pretty much focused on the defense and security aspects.
Right.
When it comes to the Quad's coverage right now, I mean, yeah, is much broader. They include economic connectivity, um yeah, so, and also the provision of development assistance to third countries, yeah, these things. So this is the main difference so far. I mean, so who knows, perhaps the AUKUS will catch up with the agenda, with their agenda of the Quad. Let's see if that happens. So this is the distinction.
Right, right. I do agree that the future has a lot to hold, and we cannot have jump too far into the conclusion and guess what will be happening within the region. So let's dig in a little bit deeper into another aspect of the topic we chosen today. So we chose an AUKUS in the regional security architecture. So how do you define the regional security structure or architecture?
Okay, so what we have right now is, when we say regional security architecture, this pretty much equates to, also the kind of regional order that we have.
Mm.
And the regional order that we have is, countries in the region depend much on the United States as a regional security guarantor. So every time countries in the region feel a sense of insecurity, what they do is they would call on the United States as a sort of a balancer vis-a-vis a certain country. And with the AUKUS, we see that countries from far away are starting to come in.
Right.
For example, um, the United Kingdom.
Mm.
So I think this is just a series of events, that will unfold, and this coincides. I mean, this AUKUS also coincides with the Indo-Pacific policy of that the United Kingdom has issued. And actually, it's not just the United Kingdom, that has an Indo-Pacific policy.
Mhm.
You also have the French, you also have the Dutch, the Germans. So right now, these countries, I mean, many European countries are now opting to pivot to the
Right.
Indo-Pacific. I mean, especially ASEAN.
Mm.
Yeah, because they see the economically, they see the economic potential of ASEAN as a market or an alternate market.
Mhm.
And second, in terms of security, they think I think they think that um, uh, that there's a lot of demand from ASEAN countries to boost their security capability. Yeah.
That's true. So since you mentioned a little bit about the EU state and their willingness or in your word, their pivot to Indo-Pacific, I was wondering how do other countries and other institutions react to the AUKUS as well? I mean, we're looking at a
Yeah.
whole range of a lot of institutions like ASEAN or
Mhm.
states in a region like Japan or China. So what is your view on that?
Right. Of course. So there were several countries, who were displeased with the signing with the creation of the AUKUS. One, of course, would be the French,
Right.
because I mean President Macron called it a stab in the back, because instead of the French, instead of them getting that billions of dollars of submarine deal, it now will go to the United States. So it's a missed opportunity for the French, and so they're furious because I mean they consider these countries as yeah, they're Western allies, and they're within the NATO. They are within the Western world. They're within the NATO framework. So how come the French were not consulted and sidelined? So that was their sentiment. So apart from the French that was displeased, there's also the Chinese, because the Chinese see this kind of arrangement as they call it a Cold War mentality, because they think that this is an alliance meant to contain them. They think that these countries are starting to gang up on them. Yeah, but actually, something that I would like to clarify: this AUKUS arrangement is not an alliance.
Mhm.
It
That
is
is true.
not, because there's been a lot of hype that this is a new alliance. It is not. It is a mere security partnership. And the security partnership is very different from an alliance. An alliance is where you have there is a defense treaty. I mean, like a mutual defense treaty. So something like the United States has with my country, the Philippines, something that the US has with Japan, Korea, Australia. So there is that obligation to aid one another in the event of an armed attack. The same is true in the case of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. There is a collective security clause, where if a member state is attacked, the rest would have to respond and help that particular state.
Right.
You don't see that clause here in AUKUS. So in AUKUS, what is underscored is that these three countries would just help each other boost their defense industrial cooperation, things like that. So this is the difference. Yeah.
Right, so we see a lot of controversial views on the AUKUS itself. So regarding the region, do you think that AUKUS can have any geopolitical impact?
Yes, absolutely, especially towards China,
Mm-hmm.
because the Chinese will likely perceive this as a measure for some countries, like gearing up for a maritime or some sort of a naval warfare, because again the emphasis is on submarines and other military aspects. So of course, for every action there is a reaction, and the Chinese would certainly react to this. And I think a few days ago, or I think last week, the Chinese already, if you read between the lines, they already reacted because they tested a hypersonic, um, some sort of a hypersonic missile.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So in that missile, you can put nuclear warheads on that missile, and that missile, can go super fast. So sometimes it can even penetrate or circumvent missile shields or defense systems. That's why it alarmed the United States. So in fact, not just that, the Chinese could also beef up, their security posturing.
Mm.
They have what they call the second artillery. It's like their missile force, so they could further bolster their missile capability and even nuclear, because they anticipate that these nuclear submarines that Australia will have would lead to being nuclear capable submarines. So yeah, so this is, I think, the dynamics of it. The Chinese would certainly react, and as the Chinese react to these actions of the AUKUS countries, China's neighboring countries then would feel insecure, especially those who have claims in the South China Sea, or even those who have disputes with China, like India, for example,
Mm.
like Japan, of course, Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam. So all of these countries would put malice into China's defense and military buildup. So this is now what we call security dilemma at play.
Exactly.
It's a vicious cycle. So yeah, it could up the tensions in the region. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was something I was going to ask you, but it seems like you have already included that because I can see that from your from your perspective, the action of China, like testing the hypersonic missile, can be considered as something that may risk the regional stability if that type of action keeps building up. If other country can look at that as a sign, perceive that as a sign of maybe something in some sense of more negative, then it would really could be a risk for the stability of the region, as well as the major power competition. So
Mm.
let's talk a little bit more in detail about how the AUKUS could enhance perhaps Philippines strategic culture here and in its
Mm.
position. Yeah.
Okay, you mean like the benefit to the Philippines?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You also mentioned, I remember, Miss Pong, you mentioned about the reaction of the other countries. Like,
Yes.
okay, so it's not just the French and the Chinese who
Mm.
were displeased with the AUKUS. Some ASEAN countries also had some reservations about the AUKUS, like Indonesia
Mm.
and Malaysia. And this is because these countries are, if you would look into their history, these are the countries that pretty much advocated for a region that is free of a great power rivalry,
Ah.
and they no longer want to see. I think this came about when we entered the decolonization period.
Mhm.
So and also during the Cold War. So that's why I think Malaysia and Indonesia are really major proponents of a region that is free of great power politics, great power rivalry, because they're sick. They're sick and tired of our region being beset by, you know, by great power competition. And so, who were the countries that were supportive? Okay, that includes my country. Uh, Secretary Locsin was very explicit when he said that the AUKUS would lead to a favorable regional balance of power. And I think Vietnam was also quite supportive, although maybe not as explicit as our statement. But and Singapore, I think, was constructive, issued a constructive statement towards on the AUKUS. So you see, there's a very diverse response in ASEAN,
Mhm.
and this is because of each country's strategic culture. Okay, so for example, my country is a U.S. ally, so our strategic orientation is different from that of Indonesia's, that of Malaysia's, and other ASEAN member states. And okay, so you asked about how could this help third countries like the Philippines.
Right.
So, for example, if these the AUKUS countries would coordinate their policies in terms of helping build up the the capabilities of third countries, then the third countries, like my country, would benefit from it. So that's one reason. And as our secretary said, Secretary Locsin, it could provide some sort of a balance. Okay, so what then is the downside to this? So it's like of course a double-edged sword. Of course, it would escalate like, yeah, as the Chinese said, arms race, or because the Chinese would certainly not take this sitting down. As I said, they will really respond. So if countries in the region, if China would respond, and then it's likely also that even North Korea could respond, because because they are allergic to also U.S. security posturing in the region.
Right.
So and we all know that there's some sort of like a like a strategic partnership between China and North Korea. Both of them are critical of the United States. So both of these countries do not want to see a United States and its allies increasing their security posture in the region. Yeah. Yeah. So that is that's the upside and the downside to this new arrangement, I would say.
Okay, so yeah, I understand that there can be some mixed views towards the AUKUS. Well, in Vietnam, we also watch very closely what's happening, what's going on with the region, and I think that the AUKUS, the cooperation within the AUKUS mechanism, should, especially like within atom energy, like nuclear, should be very closely monitored in order not to be in order not to risk anything that may risk the regional stability, even the factor like the environmental, because nuclear energy could be very dangerous to pick around if so we can see that the AUKUS is still young, but it definitely would develop in the future. So do you think that in the near future, the AUKUS will continuously play a more important role in the region?
Okay, so the thing with international regimes or any arrangements is that they can evolve. International regimes, international institutions, they can evolve, they can expand. I give you the example of for example, you had the G7. G7 became what's that? I think it became G8 before with Russia. Now we have G20, and the Five Eyes. The Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. There are now talks of adding Japan into the mix. So we cannot totally rule out that AUKUS might expand. Who knows? It might even include the French, because the French felt that they were sidelined. So what I'm saying is that there's a possibility for the membership to expand, and it's not just the membership, but also the agenda. The AUKUS agenda might also include, economics, connectivity, because as I said a while ago, it already includes collaboration on dual-use technologies. And right now, you see, what's critical here is how would the AUKUS countries relate to other international regimes like the Quad?
Right.
Will they coordinate closely with the Quad? How will they relate? How will they engage ASEAN? You see, with the Quad countries, we see that there is now this supply chain resilience initiative, I think. So what the Quad countries, I think, want to do is, they want to shift their supply chains away from China, something like that. So, and actually, so, and this is in a sense a blessing to ASEAN, an opportunity for ASEAN because they will choose to engage with ASEAN. And likewise, the Chinese also want to lessen their dependence on the United States because of the trade war, because of the, yeah. So everybody, it seems like now wants to go to ASEAN, and ASEAN is trying to be as inclusive as it can be. The ASEAN centrality. I think ASEAN centrality is synonymous to ASEAN inclusivity. So ASEAN is basically inviting everybody, engaging with everybody. And so I think this is the good side of what's happening in terms of the strategic competition. So ASEAN will be on the receiving end of all these economic initiatives, these economic inducements. Yeah.
Great. So very great talk so far. You've covered what is the AUKUS, what countries are currently involved, the objectives, as well as shed some lights on the comparison between the AUKUS and the already existing mechanism like Quad. And also we've learned so much about the different views or reactions from other countries like EU state or regional power like Japan, China, and also from ASEAN states as well. And I really, frankly, I could go on for hours, but unfortunately, that's our time for today's talk show. So Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for sharing your insight. Those are very, very valuable. And to the audience, please don't forget to log in next week where we'll have another talk show the same day next week on Friday.
Ms. Phoung, are there questions in the chat box or something?
No, not any questions so far, but I'm sure that the questions come streaming in. We'll know who to contact.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you also.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you and goodbye.
Yeah. Bye.